Welcome to the first full-length episode of DGM Starter. So this is a podcast that I'm interviewing people who have started either multiple small businesses and are really familiar with that starting process, or people who are currently growing or starting their business right now, because that's one thing that most people don't really get an inside view on is the actual technical that goes into everything with that business. So today I have a buddy. I met him actually in Sweden about 3 years ago or so.
That's right.
But it's so we have Devin Lee on today, and he is starting a business where it's kind of a software application helping contractors stay organized. I'm not super familiar with all the details of it, but I'm sure we'll get a little more into that as we keep talking. But Devin and I, we had a chat a little bit before the episode, and we were talking about how he's in the prototyping phase of his business, trying to really nail down how to make his product actually work for his clients and who he's going to be selling it to. So to start out though, how did you what made you want to start this business? How did you come up with this idea?
Well, to try to keep it as short as possible, we'll just dive right into it. So I actually started estimating for an electrical company down in a place called Spanish Fork. And so basically what I did is I started using this software that was currently available to us, and I started seeing a lot of shortcomings with the software. I started seeing a lot of problems just with project management, a lot of problems with estimating. It was very convoluted and very complex, kind of hard to understand. And so I started working on Google Sheets actually. So I started just figuring out, okay, here's some items that I can do that will solve some of these problems using Google Sheets. Long story short, that Google Sheet document turned into a full-on application. There's sheets that are using pivot tables. I mean, not sure if all this information is going to go over your head, but there's pivot tables, there's you name it, filters, there's sorts, there's VLOOKUPs, there's functions, there's drop down boxes, there's links. And basically what happened is I started seeing those problems and I started solving those problems using Google Sheets. And I oftentimes would go to professors or other people and ask questions because I was getting so frustrated with the current methods that we were using. And so I would question down my professors and I would ask them about databases. I'd ask them about Google Sheets. I'd ask them about functions. And it just kind of perpetuated from there. It just kind of built after a while.
That's super interesting. You pretty much created the program already, and it just didn't have a user-friendly interface for people to read it. It was just in a spreadsheet.
Exactly.
That's crazy. So I think that's an awesome place to really start with the idea. I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who they know they want to be an entrepreneur, but they don't know what to do. They don't know what they love. And I guess that there's probably 1,000,001 different ways you can take to decide, finding an idea for a business that you want to dig deep into. But that's an awesome one that you came up with. You were just doing a job, found a problem that was not solved or was solved poorly, and so you went into it. And so at what point, you had this spreadsheet built out, at what point did you realize that this is a potential business opportunity, that you wanted to dig further into this and make this an actual thing?
So it's been going on for about 1.5 years now, and I think it's been ups and downs. You'd have this aha moment. You're like, oh yeah, I got this figured out. I'll just build it out of Google Sheets. I'll just do this and it'll work smoothly. You'll run into a roadblock and you'll run into another one and you'll run into another one and you'll keep running into them. I mean, that's just the story of the game, I guess. But I guess when I really started to realize there was a potential is as I started meeting with professors and I started to transition to more of a more robust system to kind of take over. So I started looking into databases and I started looking into they called rapid rapid application design. And so basically it's just a glorified spreadsheet, and they basically condense software packages into a very fast, viable product. And so I started looking into that, and I started seeing opportunities. And then my brother-in-law are both developers, and so I saw that opportunity to be able to bring them in on it. And then my boss, he was very intrigued, and he's very entrepreneurial. And so he kind of gave me the go ahead, and he's like, "Yeah, go ahead and do what you need to do, and we'll make it happen." And so I guess it all just came down to like really pushing, like never giving up and never like just like rolling over, I guess. Because I mean, there's multiple times throughout the process where you run into like a roadblock. You're like, okay, it's done. Whether that's your competition, whether that's like not knowing what the freak you're doing, or I mean, there's multiple roadblocks. But I think that over time, if you really want to solve a problem, I mean, it's going to take some effort. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. The one thought while you're talking that I had was, like college, that's a popular way for everyone to learn stuff. You said that you had professors, so I think you probably made a more excellent use of your resources at college than most people do. It's actually going and asking those professors for like advice on real world projects that you're working on. But
Yep.
One thing that I'm interested to hear your thoughts on is while you're going through this process of you find the problem, you're working on it, you think you have a pretty good solution, you keep hitting these roadblocks, and I'm sure you went through your ups and downs where you're like, okay, like this is probably it. We just have a few more wrinkles, and then you hit another one, and that's just how life is. But have you ever taken the chance or the time to just like sit back and realize that even though you're still in like the early stages of getting this out, how much you've learned during this process? I think that's something that I've had other projects where I went through them after 3, 4, 5, 6 months. I kind of called it dead, and a lot of people just call it dead. They say, okay, I lost, move on. But what I've realized is every project that I work on, even though I've not had anything like blow up, get huge, and be a huge success, I've realized that project has taught me more than almost anything else that has in the past. So I guess that's a really bad question. This is not really a way for you to answer it other than like yes or no.
Well, I feel like it kind of goes back to that quote. I don't know who says it, but it says, "Fail fast, fail early." And I think that with every adventure or every like thing that you do, you gain experience and wisdom. I mean, I don't know. Going through the process, you realize a lot of different things. I mean, yeah, like I feel like you never will quite understand every aspect or everything about your business or anything about life in general. But I think that does bring you to a better understanding that, hey, I don't know what the freak I'm doing. so I think it's really cool. I mean, you're really like, I feel like it's an investment in yourself, you know, and I think it's going to be beneficial for you for the rest of your life when you know the ins and outs and the workings of different types of companies, or just having that knowledge will perpetuate you through life.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Like it also takes a little bit of humility to realize that
Seriously.
I don't know everything. I'm just failing over and over again. But
yeah,
but you hear all the successful people, like when they started, they knew almost nothing, and they still say they only hire people who are smarter than them, and so they realize they're definitely not the smartest person in the room. They just know how to find that right talent, and they really know how to learn.
So true. Like, what's that other quote? It's like, the more that you know, the more that you realize you don't know. And so I think it's very applicable in that sense. And like you said, I mean, if you find those right individuals to take those aspects or those different problems that you don't quite understand or comprehend, then putting that team together is the biggest asset that you'll be able to develop. I think it's cool. I like that.
Yeah. And so one thing that I really want to be able to dig a little deeper in, both in this channel with other people other entrepreneurs that I'll be meeting with down the road. But in this conversation, I mentioned that, and we talked beforehand, and I mentioned at the beginning that you're kind of in that prototyping stage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I'm sure 95% of the people know what a prototype is, know like the basic what that means. But if like one thing that I've been confused about in the past is some like people talk about market research or prototyping, things like that, those early stages of a product. And I know it's important. I know what it is. But then if someone were to say, okay, do some market research on this, I would have no clue where to start. And so I would like to dig a little deeper into kind of the steps that you're taking to prove your product and to prove that it is actually filling a hole and that there is a demand there in a way. So if you could kind of walk us through your process, I'm sure you're in the middle of it, so it's not like it's complete, but I'm sure you have a strategy moving forward as well.
Totally. I think that when you talk about market research, it's like this vague term that everybody uses, like gotta do your market research, gotta do this, gotta make sure you're providing a product for your clients. Like, I think that terminology is just it's very vague, and oftentimes you don't, where I still don't fully quite grasp or understand what that means. But I think that that book that we brought up in the past was Nail It and Scale It, and I think it goes pretty in depth about what market research is and what it entails. I mean, there's a lot of factors that you got to take in consideration when you're going into business, and I think that multiple, like it, for starters, you got to know like who is your person or your client or the individual that you're going to be selling this product to, and like, okay, what does that mean? Well, it's like, well, you got to know what are the tendencies. Are they very meticulous? Are they like don't care about, you know, like you got to know, understand their demographics. You got to understand their characteristics. You got to understand the type of people they are. That way you can cater the product to their need. Like if you don't know that target market or that target individual or what that individual likes, like for example, like I've done estimating, but I'm a terrible estimator because I want everything to be exact and I want it to be in the right place. So I want an application, right, that's going to be exact, where I can put in exact numbers and make everything work exactly right. That doesn't exist in estimating. And that's not an estimator. An estimator has different tendencies than I do. He's not like very meticulous. He's not, you know what I mean? So you got to understand your market first, your target market, and then that's just the beginning. I mean, then you got to understand your competition. Like, okay, that's a whole new ball game. I mean, you're talking about it. My consultant once told me, he said that if you think that there's a product out there that hasn't been invented, you're wrong. It's like he said that there's not a song out there that hasn't been sung. You know, and I think that it carries a lot of weight, that every product or everything that's out there has already been created or already been thought of or already had an idea, but it's never been brought to fruition. It's never put in a particular sequence or whatever it is. Like it never came about. I think that it's very similar in business. Like there's people out there that have already have your idea. There's people out there that are already doing what you're doing, and you got to understand what they're doing, and you understand what makes you different, and you understand why you're doing it. And so I think that's a huge thing as well. Another thing is you got to take in consideration money. Like you got to figure out what your product's worth. So you got to know where other products are at, and you got to know what you're contributing, what's your value. You got to know the pain. I mean, it's just, I feel like there's just a lot of, I actually tried to build like a spreadsheet of the different characteristics or what is market research. And it'd probably be beneficial just like to like hit those bullet points, you know what I mean? But there's a lot to it. I mean, and I feel like with every step that you take, you realize, oh freak, I didn't think about that. Another example, I mean, I'm just like rambling at this point, so cut me off when you feel like it needs to be to move on.
Go for it. Keep going. Preach.
Preach. Good example. So we developed this application. It's an field ordering app, right? So we didn't do any market research. We didn't reach out to individuals that the application was contingent upon, meaning that we need help or we needed parts of a different entity in order to make this application function. So we didn't research or we didn't take the time to like go out and figure out, okay, what all do we need to make this application function? What other people are involved? So long story short, we get to the end and the application's all built out. And guess what? The people that we were talking to be able to supply this application of what we needed no longer wanted to be a part of it because it would run them out of business. So it's like those little things that you just never think about. Like, okay, yeah, we got to realize what all is involved when you put a product in place. Like, who is that going to be put out of business? Like, people are supplying you with information. It's just very, I'm not sure if I'm making any sense at this point, but you got to cross your T's and dot your I's. I mean, but at the same time, I mean, you never will know everything. I mean, that's just the story of life. And so I feel like you make the best judgment calls you can, and you move forward, just like you were talking about with learning. I mean, you never will be able to see it all. I mean, that's sucks, but it's the reality of it.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. That um, I'm sure there's a ton of people who, and myself included, who have a business idea. They get excited about it. They do a little bit of research. Say, okay, I think I can make this happen. They put in some more work, get ready, they launch it, and then when they launch it, they realize there's 2,000 question marks that they need to know in order to make like the right decisions. How, like, what should I price this? Like, I can't just guess what the pricing is. Like, who am I actually targeting? What kind of marketing can I use? Where are they? And so like you listed off, I don't know, 15 things. You said you had a spreadsheet with all the points of what defines like market research. um, and so that can be really discouraging. And I don't want anyone who listens to this to hear this conversation and realize like, okay, maybe, or just say to themselves that maybe they're not made out for this. Because like everyone's made out for like what we realize is if you're willing to learn is really what it comes down to. And so you went through that list of question marks. And one of the main things that you mentioned was like really understanding who is your target market, who are you selling this to. And you might have had a little bit of an advantage because you worked for someone who was your target market. But what other like specific actions have you taken in order to better understand who your target market is?
I think it comes a lot down to I've actually called multiple electricians, and so I've talked to a lot of estimators, and I've talked to, so I guess the gist of the application is that we're trying to simplify the project management and estimating process behind the electrical field. And so I've conducted interviews with general contractors, which are above us. They basically oversee projects. I've contacted or had interviews and conversations and built the product based upon information received from other sources like vendors, where we get our material. Then same thing goes for subcontractors. And so I hold these interviews to basically pick their brains about how they would communicate things, how they would, you know what I mean? When I say this is what I mean. When he says this is what he means. When we give you a price, this is what this price is for. And so it's just like that, because like right now I am in that position where I do estimating, and so I am the target market in that sense. But what I'm getting at is I built this application based on my own personal like interpretations of like what I'm seeing is the problem. But I got to take myself out of my shoes and put myself in someone else's shoes and another estimator. And so what I've done is I've actually reached out to a couple other electrical companies, and I've conducted interviews and asked them how they are estimating, how they do their processes, the problems that they're seeing. And then I probe them with these questions that I see that happen all the time with me, and I ask them how they solve it and how they go about it. And then by doing these interviews or these questioning, I get a better understanding of how people are currently solving these problems. And then I can figure out a streamlined way of doing that with this application. If that made any sense.
Yeah. So essentially what you're doing is you're going out and you're reaching personally to these people, and you're having conversations with them, understanding one, what their current solution is, like two, what their pain points are with their current solution, and then like how you are. And then so now you know their pain points, you know what they don't like about their current solution. So now you're able to solve that problem. one thing that I found is really interesting. My oldest brother, he lives in Florida, and his profession is he's a salesman. Right now, he sells shipping for companies. So I think he really focuses in on international shipping, but that's not really important to the story. But we talk business sometimes, and what I've realized from him is how important an understanding of sales is to like building a business. And that's essentially what you're doing when you're interviewing. You're not, it's not a hard sale, you're not closing them, but you are finding your market, and you are identifying what they need, and you are providing a solution to their needs. And that's exactly what you do. What a good salesperson would do is they would go and meet with their lead, discuss with them, get to know what their problems are, and then find the best solution possible for them. And then, yeah, so that's something that I guess that's one tip. I definitely need to work better at being in sales, because I don't feel super comfortable going out talking person to person all the time. I'm a little more of an introvert that way, and there's a lot of people like that. That's one tip. Anyone out there looking to start a business, make sure at least like read a couple sales books. If you really want to go all in, go get a sales job and practice it. It's super uncomfortable, but you'll learn a lot from that job.
Totally.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of went on my own tangent there, but
That was good.
but and so as you're reaching out to and to these contractors, understanding what they're saying, what's the next step? Like, how do you take that in and specific, like, I guess, what's your process once you have that interview information to actually apply what you're learning back to your product?
So a lot of times I take them portions of so right now I have mock-ups. They're both in spreadsheets, and as well as we use Adobe XD. And so what I do is I have these mock-ups, and I take them to these interviews, and basically the application I lay down on the table and I say, okay, when I say this, so for example, the other week I met with a general contractor. Okay, brief story is we give them a proposal, we give them a quote saying we can do the job for this amount. But the problem is that you have so many different facets that when you say I'll do it for this amount, what are you doing for that amount? What does this entail? And so what I'm doing is I sit down with the general contractor and say, okay, what do you want to see on this proposal? What do you want to know is covered? What do you want to see? You know what I mean? Like, how can I communicate better to you what is provided? And how can I communicate to you what we don't have? And that way that he understands when he gets a proposal what it entails. Because if I just have a $3 million quote, okay, that's awesome that I have a $3 million quote, but what does that include? Like, does it have fixtures? I mean, this is all electrical jargon, so that's probably just. But you see what I'm saying is the better that we can communicate, the better that I take that information. I say, oh, you don't want to see these lines. Oh, you want to see it like this. Oh, you want to. Okay, so when you read this, you actually thought it was this way. Oh, okay, I'll make that adjustment. So I'm just making notes on these prototypes, and then I basically take that information and take it to the team and say, okay, how can we solve these problems, or how can we do this better or more efficient per his requirements? Then we go back to the drawing board, readjust things, revamp. Like, I think we're on version 6 right now is where we're at. So, and that's not including, so that's like big changes. Like, I mean, there's thousands of changes that are happening, but we're just constantly whittling at it and changing it to where it's viable.
That's awesome. I think that point is I feel like you've laid a great groundwork so that you're at this point that you've made 6 changes, and these are 6 changes that are all getting you closer to the right step. And that's something that I think most people, if they're looking to start a business, once they get to that step, they realize that there's a lot of work to be done, but that's a really exciting part to be at, because you're actually making progress in the right direction. There's question marks, but you've already answered 100 question marks before that. So That's awesome. I'm really excited to hear how it goes. I'll keep in touch with you, and if you're open to it, I'd love to have you back on here in 6 months or so and get an update.
Of course, bankrupt on the street.
Don't do what I did.
It's too late. I've already committed.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in. This has been the first episode of DGM Starter, and really what we're doing here is we're trying to dig a little deeper into maybe a little more of the technical things that are harder to learn unless it's in a paid course. So stay tuned. I'll keep interviewing more entrepreneurs, especially those right in the beginning stages, so that you can understand what successful entrepreneurs are doing, and then you can watch it every step of the way. But stay tuned. Please don't forget to drop a like, subscribe. We have a lot of great videos and content coming your way. Thanks for tuning in.